Hi, this is Toy Lay with educator.com, and we're talking about jQuery and AJAX, and we're right down to the very end, but this is not the least part of jQuery. It's probably one of the most important things because then you can just really start seeing the power of what you're doing. In the last lesson, we did a real-world example, and I'm going to use that real-world example, but now we're going to do it as a plugin. So if you haven't looked at the last lesson, you should, because we built this cool interactive text box, and now we're going to build it. We're going to wrap all that stuff and make it to a plugin. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, it'll become pretty obvious by the end of the lesson. So let's just get right to it. I've set up the HTML is pretty much looking exactly like the other stuff, okay, except I had taken out all that stuff. I should really go put it back in. It's not this. Let's put all this back in so we know where we're starting from. Okay. So now, if we go back here, all this goo will be gone because if you recall, we had eliminated that at the beginning of at the end of, by the time we really kind of shaped our little functionality. And once again, I have this here so that you know that as a reference to the data in the database. Now, plugins. What is a plugin? Basically, all the stuff here, you see, is all loaded in after the document has loaded. We can actually do something like this. So that it loads in. All the stuff here can be loaded into a function, a discrete little unit. So basically, like say we do stuff like this. We do this key up. We're doing stuff like AJAX. We can create our own. Those are functions. Those are methods. Functions. Show, val. Those are the defaults given by jQuery. We can make our own, and we do that by using this function, setting up this function and naming it. Okay. There's certain kind of grammar that you have to do. I'm just going to throw it at you. So let's do this. Let's start off with this first. And there's a boilerplate template up online under the jQuery documentation, which I suggest that you look at because I forget it all the time. I just kind of copy and paste it into my stuff. Okay. Okay. Now, once again, just because I'm going to maintain my $big J so that there's no conflict with other jQuery that might be floating around from other developers or other applications or other plugins you might use. And this is how we start. We first give the function a name. And I spelled that wrong. I'm going to give it, since we're doing the interactive drop down text box, I'm going to give it the name of drop down text box equals. Now, we kick this into high gear. First, we have to set up the page, which is all of this stuff here. Actually, that already happens. All right, so then we set up the page. This already happens too. Set the grid going. Actually, I'm going to move this into my plugin. And the reason why is that if there's no drop down on the page, I don't want this call going to the back. It's an extraneous call. All right. So let's set that up. I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but calls to the server take more time than just a simple mathematical JavaScript function, because it requires the call over the internet to the server. And if you're having a database call, that's where the bottlenecks are. You try to make your SQL queries as speedy as possible, not take down too much data at one time. You try to get your joins to a minimum, certainly your left joins, because you don't want it to, because it kills your response time. You're all waiting for the data coming back from the database. So therefore, I don't necessarily want this whole database call, which is getting the users in here, getting these users to show up, if there's no text box, because it's irrelevant. Okay, so we put it into the function. Also, this needs to move into our function, because this is only valuable if there's a text box. So let's put this here. Now the reason why I don't put this up in the drop-down text box is because even though there might not be a text box on the page, these areas still might exist. Hide them. Okay? And certainly once we start doing all this kind of key up stuff and interaction with my text box, that goes back into my plugin. Okay? Now, I've kind of moved all the relevant code into the plugin, but this plugin isn't going to work right now. And that's because I haven't set up. This happens regardless, this getting the database stuff. But now we're going to do text box specific stuff, so we have to wrap it in its own little wrapper here. And I will explain this to you once I've done it, because it'll make more sense once I've done it. I think I need an extra one, right? Do I need an extra one? Return this each function. Yeah, I do need that. Yes, that'll work. Okay. So I need to wrap this. And I am also going to change that. I've just changed my mind. I'm going to put this drop down up with my text box, because that drop down is part of the unit of the text box. So we're going to hide it. Okay. All right. So now what's got to happen is I've got to change this. Now, this will work on its own right now. You know what? Let's try it. I'll show you. This will work right now on its own. Except that's not working. Why is that? My text box alone isn't. Oh, this won't work. It's lost its scope, so I have to hit this. If I did that, then that should work. Nope, didn't work either. Oh. Oh. Okay. The reason why is because, okay, I functionified it, but the thing is I haven't attached it to anything. It's all its own little, remember, this is like saying HTML or show, but I haven't attached it to an element yet. Okay, so let's attach my function, my custom function, to an element, which would be this text box, which is now called, which is user1. And we called it, what do we call it? Drop down text box. I think that's what we called it. So, let's start off that way. Okay? Now it's doing it. All right? So we functionified it, we made our own custom function, and then we attached it to an element. All right? Now, this all works. If I were going to return this back to what it was before, that would work because it's within the scope. See, that works. Okay? But the reason why you want to use this is because of this each function. Let's get rid of all this stuff here. Let's this-ize it. Okay. Let's just make sure it works before. Oops. It does work because it gave me all the numbers. Okay, there we go. And that works. Good. Okay, so we're doing good. The reason why you want to use this as opposed to specifying the name of that element is exactly the reason why we do this. Because we want to give the capability of any element to use this function. So, say I had a second text box. We want to be able to use the drop-down text box on there. In fact, let's try it. Let's copy this stuff here. And let's name this user2. Who would you like to search? Part 2. Let's make sure that that class name is changed as well. Okay. So now we have 2 text boxes, and because I functionalized it, made it a plugin, and I attached it to both elements, it should work on both elements. In fact, let's do this. Let's get rid of this and make sure, see, nothing happens here. But if I do that, stuff starts happening here. Right? It's supposed to happen. Now I'll tell you why it doesn't happen. Because I've made it generic. It doesn't know where to go with it. That's why it's dropping down this text box. Dropping down the text, the drop down on both. So now we have to start doing things like adjusting our plugin so that it's more generic, because right now I'm calling, so it's more generic because right now I'm calling when it does, it's looking for this specific thing. It doesn't know which one to do, so we have to be a little more particular about it. Oh, this is why. Oh, this doesn't know which value to look for. Right now it's looking for that one because it comes up first in the DOM, so it doesn't know that it's actually searching for something. There we go. Okay, so now what we want to do is be particular, build into our plugin functionality that says when I type this key in, just keep it in my family, not all the other families. Okay, so we've got to Now I use this notation here to, again, the dollar sign determines an element, not necessarily like here, which would be a value. Okay, so so the drop down is, if we look at the code here, it's going to be if I do a key up in here, it's going to be the parent, the sibling of my parent. So my aunt or my uncle. So that's how we do it. That's how we genericize it a bit. Because we're always gonna try to build. Same thing with here. We're always gonna try to build it this way, where it's this. In this particular case, where it's me, my parent's sibling. Okay? You could also do stuff with names and find and closest and that kind of stuff. But in this particular case, when we're having the same structure multiplied over and over and over again, we could just do parent and sibling. So $DD is now going to be this, which would be me, my parent, next. Okay, and so we're going to do this just to experiment. We're going to alert $DD attribute class, just to make sure that we're not going crazy, and we're going to return on that one, so that we're just going to cut loose and not finish the rest of the JavaScript or the jQuery, because we don't need to know. We just want to make sure that this is pointing at the right one. Drop down DD W120. Well, I don't know if it's actually pointing to the right one. You know why? Because they both have the same name. So let's give this another name, yet another name, and let's call it just test, so we know that that's what it is. Okay. Good. It's pointing to the right one. It's not pointing to this one. All right? So now that we know that $DD is the right thing, now we say we don't even need the $J notation. We could just say $DD dot show, and we can apply it to anywhere $J drop down shows, $DD. Here we go. I think that's all of them. So we're kind of genericizing this whole thing. Bam! Isn't that awesome? Only does the one thing. So if we were to do this, now it knows. Oh, I don't think I have an F in there. Let's try M, because I know we have a bunch of M's in there. Okay. Now it knows which one it's talking about. And of course you're going to have to genericize, just like we genericize the drop-down area, we're going to have to genericize the answer area. So answer is this, and you would do the same kind of logic as I did before to figure out how to get there. And then each answer would populate, each drop-down would populate the answer in its own family unit, not in all the family units. All right? Pretty awesome. Now you can attach this plugin, this function, to any element that you want on your website anywhere. All right, just as long as you follow the same, HTML structure here, it's going to work like magic. And you don't have to sit there and you don't have to sit there and copy and paste over and over and over again for each element. You just write one function and you attach the function to any element that you want to have that function. That's it for plugins. All right. In wrap up, I'm going to wrap up the course because that's it for this course. But in wrap up, you don't have to use jQuery. There are other frameworks you can use. There's Mood Tools, there's Dojo. I'm just focused on jQuery just because it seems to be right now the flavor of the month or a couple of years. I do actually use jQuery in a lot of the development that I do, the paid development work that I do. People like it. My clients like it. I'm very comfortable with it myself. Doesn't mean that you have to do it. If you like Mood Tools, if you like Dojo, please use them. It's just the power of these frameworks are pretty much undeniable right now. And if get good with CSS, once you get all that together, you make something that's way more organic. You turn a machine that only talks in zeros and ones into something that's really organic and humanistic and really responds well with clients and users and just people, just the ooh-ah effect with just a few lines. It's great. All right. I hope that you got something out of this class. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Toy. This is educator.com. I got a couple more courses coming up. I hope you join me for those as well. Thanks a lot.